Is the brand new Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 6, I really thought I was gonna flip it that time. Is the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 6 worth $1,100? In today's video, we find out. Yes, I do have a sneaker on the page. I was looking up sneakers before this. So I've been using the Z Flip 6 for about a week at this point, and I've got a lot of thoughts about this phone. I think generally it's solid, but there are definitely some things that I like and some things that I definitely don't like, which we'll talk about in today's video. Not only that, but this phone has also increased in price since last year. So in today's video, we're gonna cover all of that and talk about whether the brand new Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 6 is worth your money. Let's start things off by talking about the industrial design of the Z Flip 6. And I've got to say, I am very impressed with the build quality of this phone. It feels solid. Now, as you may have noticed at the beginning of this video, I was having trouble flipping this phone open, which I think is a good thing and a bad thing. Bad thing in that it's not as fun to open as some other phones available on the market like the Motorola Razr Plus 2024. Good thing though, in that it's probably more durable than that phone. To be fair, I've only been using these two phones for a week and 2 weeks at this point, so I don't really have a long-term durability update in either of these phones, but the Z Flip 6 does feel a little bit more solid, and I think a lot of that has to do with this new hinge. So according to Samsung, this new hinge is not only smaller, but it's also slightly reinforced from the previous hinge, and it's also IP48 dust and water resistant. So essentially, you can have this phone in fresh water up to 5 meters for around 30 minutes and it'll be good to go. And apparently this phone is more dust resistant than the previous phone. That being said, dust is still the enemy of flip phones. I just don't think that's ever going to get any better. At least not anytime soon. This is not the kind of phone you want to bring to the beach with you. Samsung has also said that this new hinge reduces the appearance of the crease in the middle of the screen, and I will say it does look pretty good, especially when there's no direct light on it. And when I pulled this phone out of the box, which you guys can see in my unboxing video that I dropped on the channel, there's barely any hinge visible at all. But after using this phone for about a week, the crease has seemed to get ever so slightly worse and more visible, and I think that's just the nature of the beast when it comes to folding phones. I think they all get slightly worse the more that you use them. It still looks good. You still don't really notice it, and compared to older flip phones, I mean, it's night and day. That being said, it's still visible. You're still going to notice it, and I would assume for the next couple of years at least, folding phones will always have that crease. There's not much you can do about it. The rest of the phone, though, is built incredibly well, and it's beautifully crafted. You've got Gorilla Glass Victus on both the back and the front of the phone. Actually, it's Gorilla Glass Victus 2, which is even stronger than Gorilla Glass Victus, as you could probably guess. It's pretty scratch resistant. It's very crack resistant. I haven't had any issues with it. I've dropped this phone a couple times. No problems, not from very high though, to be fair. Samsung went for a flat edge on the Flip 6 like they did on the Fold 6, and I actually really like the way that it looks a lot, and I also really like the way that it feels in the hand. That said, it does make it a bit harder to get your fingers in between the two halves to kind of flip it open. With the Motorola, it's got these rounded edges, which I don't like as much visually, but you can stick your finger in there easily to kind of flip it open. So there's kind of a trade-off there, but it's really not a huge deal, and you get used to just kind of grabbing the phone by the edges and flipping it open that way. The metal itself looks great. I love the satin finish, especially around the edges of the phone. You've also got the satin finished metal around the camera bumps on the phone as well. That's a new addition from last year's Z Flip 5. It gives the phone a bit more personality, and as you can see when the phone is open, it's completely flat, which is amazing. So when you set it on a table, other than the camera bumps, it's flush. I also forgot to mention about this hinge, but you can really set it in any angle and it stays. It's a really, really nice hinge. When it comes to materials and finishes and just overall design, I think Samsung knocked this phone out of the park. It feels super premium, which it should for $1,100. Unfortunately, this year Samsung did raise the price of the Z Flip phones by $100 from $1,000 to $1,100. But that aside, if you do want to get one of these newer Samsung phones, they actually have some really great trade-in options on their website, and they give you probably more money than your phone is worth, which is incredible. So if you're trying to get one of these newer phones, Samsung does make it easy for you. But let's talk about the screens on the Z Flip 6, and let's start things off with obviously the front screen. Now, unfortunately, in my opinion, Samsung kept the front screen of this phone the same, at least in size and shape. It's a 3.4-inch Super AMOLED display, and it features this interesting, cutout shape around the cameras, which I guess I don't mind. But when you compare it to the Motorola Razr Plus 2024, where the entire front of the phone is a screen, it's kind of hard to look at it because you just know that there's something better out there. That said though, it is bright, it is vibrant, it gets the job done. The downside of this front screen though is that unlike some other foldable phones on the market, you can't use all of your apps on this front screen. Instead, you have some pre-installed widgets and you can use some apps that Samsung allows you to use, but it's not very open source. I mean, you can download the Good Lock app and use pretty much every app that you want on this outer screen, but out of the box, you got some widgets like weather and health tracking and things like that, and some apps that you can use, and of course you can change the widgets, but It just feels a little bit too locked down. That said though, for most people, this front screen is probably going to be mainly used for responding to text messages or taking selfies or vlogging or something like that, and you're probably not going to be using a lot of apps on this outer screen anyway, so is it that big of a deal? Not really, especially when you can download the Good Lock app and use a lot of apps on the front of the screen anyway. Especially when you can jump through some hoops and kind of fix the problem. It's just a little thing. I just wish Samsung allowed you to basically have a smaller Android phone on the outside of your phone. And if it wasn't for other phones like the Motorola Razr, where you can use every app on the outside of your phone immediately right out of the box, it wouldn't be as big of a deal, but because other phones can do that, I don't know, it does kind of bum me out. Getting to the inside screen though, we've got a 6.7-inch dynamic AMOLED display, which looks incredible. As you would expect, it gets up to 120 Hz, which makes it buttery smooth, and it's brighter than the Z Fold 5. Not by a huge margin, but by enough. Actually, speaking of 120 Hz, only the inner screen is 120 Hz, not the outer screen. The outer screen is 60 Hz capable. Not that it's that big of a deal, and you probably won't even notice it, but there is a difference there, and if you do notice things like that, it might bother you. One thing I love to do on my phone, which I think a lot of people, most people probably love to do on their phone, is play games. And to play those games, Samsung gives you a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 for Galaxy processor and 12 GB of RAM. And I've got to say, for all the games that I play, I didn't have any issues whatsoever, and I think most phone games are not going to give you any problems. I even used Real Racing 3, which is kind of my benchmark game that I use in all phones that I test, because it's relatively graphically intensive, and I had no issues whatsoever. I mean, in a lot of ways, and more than I've even talked about, this is essentially a Samsung Galaxy S24 that flips in half. I mean, it is more expensive, but again, it flips in half. Now for playing those games and using your phone just in general, Samsung gives you a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, which is the same as last year, and like last year, from what I've heard, because I didn't have last year's phone, but from my own personal experience, it doesn't feel like enough. The phone lasts long enough, and if you're using it for general Instagram scrolling, like maybe in the morning and then maybe at night when you get home, you'll have enough battery, but if you're using it for posting Instagram Reels or TikToks or whatever the case may be, you are gonna run out of battery much more quickly than I think you would like. It's definitely not unusable by any stretch of the imagination, but it just feels like there's not enough battery life in this phone. Speaking of vlogging, one of the unique selling propositions that folding phones have is the fact that you can see yourself in the outer screen of the phone and essentially use it as a viewfinder. And on this year's Z Flip 6, Samsung has actually improved the cameras. Not only do you get your 10 megapixel front-facing camera, which is fine, it gets the job done, you also get a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera and a 50 megapixel main camera. Now, the Fold 6 has a telephoto lens, the Flip 6 unfortunately does not, you just get the 2, but in my opinion, you don't really need a telephoto lens on a, I guess, more mid-range. This isn't really a mid-range phone, but I guess when you compare it to something like the S24 Ultra, it does feel like a mid-range phone. I just personally don't find myself using a telephoto that much, and the digital zoom on this phone is good enough. From my experience, photos come out sharp and colors come out crisp and pretty true to life. Photo processing on this phone also isn't bad. It does a decent job with things like portrait mode, and videos also look decent. And again, as someone who's been vlogging on their phone for years at this point, this form factor is just so perfect for that. I just wish the cameras on this phone were a little bit better. For my vlogging, I personally use the iPhone 15 Pro Max. I've also used the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, and both phones just have incredible cameras, but unfortunately you can't see what you're filming. That's the reason I really like ultra-wide cameras, because even if you can't see yourself, you usually are in frame somewhere. With this phone, you can see yourself, but just the image quality and the sound quality is not as good as I would like. That being said, it is better than the Motorola Razr Plus 2024, the other phone that has the same form factor. But really, I might just be picky. I mean, the video quality still looks good, it still sounds good, the photos coming out of this phone are still solid, and the fact that you can set up your phone like this, as like a little tripod, and film your TikToks, is great. I've never once filmed a TikTok, actually, that's like that. I mean, I've filmed TikToks, just never danced for TikTok. I have no experience, I'm sorry. But if you do dance on TikTok, this phone is great for that because it allows you to kind of set it up anywhere and you're good to go. Content creation is where flip phones like this shine. That's why, in my opinion, they should put the best cameras in phones like this. I would immediately switch to a flip phone if the camera was the best in the market. I mean, immediately. I don't even need a great processor. I just want a really great camera, and I'd switch. Your whole YouTube channel could be this. I mean, Ryan Trahan films on his phone. You can film on your phone. I don't know. I just wish Samsung and Motorola and really anyone else making a flip phone would put the best cameras possible in their phones, because it would just make so much sense. But moving on, because this is a Samsung phone, it also features some of those Samsung AI features like Circle to Search, which I absolutely love. I've talked about it in every Samsung review that I've done this year. Of course, you've got some of the other gimmicky features like Portrait to Sketch and Sketch to Image or whatever it's called. The one feature that I do really like, but I haven't been able to use naturally because I haven't traveled since these phones came out, is the Interpreter app, where you can talk into the phone and it interprets what you said in whatever language you want on the outside of the phone, and then the other person can talk back and vice versa. It's an incredible AI feature, but from what I've heard, it doesn't work flawlessly, but it is still better than not having anything at all. I mean, I went to Japan last year and knew nothing and basically fumbled around trying to figure out how to get on the subway until like 6 hours later, someone who spoke English helped me out. I mean, that's on me for not looking up like basic Japanese phrases, but hey, if I had had this phone, it would have been useful. Like I said before, in a lot of ways, this is an S24 that flips in half, and if that's something that you're interested in, I don't think it's a bad buy. Now, $1,100 is a lot of money, especially when last year's version of the phone was just $1,000. That being said, inflation this year has been brutal, and that's probably how they're justifying the price increase. And I mean, if you compare it to the original Z Flip phones, like the 1 and the 2, or I guess the Z Flip and then the Z Flip 5G, those were both over $1,300 phones, so they still did essentially drop in price over the last couple years, but still, it kind of sucks to see the price going up rather than down. However, if you do decide you want to grab this phone, I think you're making a great decision. It's a fast enough phone. The battery life, while not the best, is still decent. The cameras, again, while not the best, are still very solid. And the form factor is awesome, and the build quality on this phone is ridiculous. The screen looks great. Of course, it runs the Samsung One UI, which is fine as well. I keep mentioning the same things I don't love about this phone, but that's just because there's not a lot not to love about this phone. This is a really great phone, and I definitely would recommend picking it up if you're looking for a flip phone like this. Now, this is not the only good flip phone in the same form factor. The Motorola Razr Plus 2024 is an excellent choice, and I am dropping a comparison video between this phone and that phone in the next couple days, so stay tuned for that. But TLDR, no matter which one you go with, you're going to be happy. Both phones are excellent, and the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 6, in my opinion, is an excellent overall phone. But hey, at this point, I would love to know your thoughts on the Samsung Z Flip 6, and whether you're planning to get one of these, whether you already have one of these, whether you don't care. Let me know all those thoughts in the comment section down below. Don't forget to subscribe. We are almost at 100,000 subscribers. It's wild. I can't believe it. Thank you guys all so much for the support. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.